Hi, this is Dr. Felicia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and the name of my practice and my channel is called Skill Set Counseling. So today I'm going to be just answering some questions and talking about the topic of gaslighting. It seems like it's a controversial topic for sure, but it also is one that I don't believe is very well understood. And so I'm going to wait for some time to see if for more people to join the stream, and that way we can talk about gaslighting some more. I also talk about other things on my channel besides gaslighting. Obviously, I talk about spiritual abuse, but spiritual abuse is an important component of gaslighting. Well, other way around, gaslighting is an important component of spiritual abuse. And I'm going to talk about how those two topics go together. So I'll wait some more and see, wait for some more time for you all to join in the conversation. If you do, once you do come into the to the live stream, go ahead and say something in the chat so that I know you're there. Sometimes the count on the top of the screen can be a little bit slow. So I'll start out by, first of all, I'll describe a little bit more about my channel for those of you who may not know about it, or you may be new to the channel. So in this channel, I talk a lot about spiritual abuse. I talk about how spiritual abuse affects individuals, and something that I focus on the channel is I want people to understand how subtle spiritual abuse can be and how insidious it can be. You know, when people think about spiritual abuse, they think oftentimes about cults or about people doing major things that end up on the news. And that is definitely a big part of spiritual abuse. But there are lesser known and lesser recognized forms of spiritual abuse that go on a lot of times behind the scenes and small religious communities, and even in interpersonal interactions. And so when people aren't aware of those, they can go for years feeling awful and feeling afraid, feeling angry, just having a lot of very negative experiences and not really understanding why. And so one of the goals of my channel is to not only bring it to light, but to help people understand how to identify it, how to prevent it, and how to recover from it. So I see that there are a couple of people in the chat. If you wouldn't mind letting me know you're here, and if you have any questions, and I'll just put some information in the chat as well. So if you are in the chat, let me know if you're here, and if you have any questions. So we're just putting this in the chat here. Let me know what questions and comments you have. I'll first start out talking about what gaslighting is. I talked a little bit about spiritual abuse and how, how I focus, the aspects of it that I focus on my channel. Something else that's important to understand, that gaslighting is it's a big part of not only spiritual abuse, but abusive behavior in general. And there's a lot of talk about gaslighting, which in some ways it's good. I think that it's good for people to understand how people can, the tools that abusive people and abusive communities can use. On the other hand, I think it can be misunderstood by people at times. So there's some people that think everything is gaslighting. And then because of that, there's sort of this reaction that an opposite reaction where, okay, it doesn't exist. And just because somebody disagrees with somebody, then it means that it's not gaslighting, or it doesn't, yeah, basically, disagreement isn't gaslighting. Both things are, there's an element of truth to both sides. Disagreement with somebody is not gaslighting, right? Criticism isn't gaslighting. People are going to have different types of conflicts throughout their lives, right? People are going to leave spiritual communities, they're going to join them, they're going to be at odds with them. And so when a negative interaction occurs between or amongst a group of people, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's gaslighting involved. In fact, there can be contentious disagreements. People can not like each other, say awful things to each other, and so that still is not what gaslighting is. Um, when gaslighting occurs, it's done over time, it's done deliberately, it's done systematically. And when that occurs, it's done with the purpose of making the target feel like they cannot believe what they are experiencing, right? Someone explained this um, very accurately. I really like their analogy. They talked about sowing seeds of doubt. And again, if you sow seeds of doubt or someone is doubting your experience, doubting is not necessarily gaslighting. But when gaslighting is occurring, it's happening because somebody is wanting to dismantle and to question how you perceive reality. And so it's really important that if you're on the receiving end of that, that you understand what it is and how to deal with that. Sometimes when people are experiencing gaslighting, they feel like they have to, so what I'm looking for, like prove themselves right. And so you'll see things like people will, you'll see instances and where people feel like they have to defend themselves. There's nothing wrong with defending yourself, but there's a way to do it when you are on the receiving end of gaslighting. One thing that I have emphasized to individuals who are experiencing this is that when you are on the receiving end of gaslighting, it really is a mind game. And so if you go at it from the perspective of, well, oh, I have to prove this person right, or prove this person wrong, rather, I have to say, I have to, you want to get out of the position of feeling like you have to argue and defend a point, because people, when they're gaslighting you, it's not a matter of proving somebody right or wrong. It's really about instilling doubt and making you really doubt what you've seen. And so sometimes, um, one way that I've heard this described is that when somebody has been gaslit, they'll say something like, well, did I just hear what I thought I heard, or did I just see what I thought I saw, right? There's a lot of doubt. And it's okay to doubt yourself from time to time. We all deal with that. But when somebody is in a position where they doubt themselves so much that they can't make heads or tails of a situation, they always think that they're wrong or that there's something wrong with them, then it makes them easier to control. And abusive people in abusive environments want to control, they want to manipulate, they want to dominate. And so it's really important that you understand what gaslighting looks like and how to combat it. So, one thing that I've seen happen is, there's like, first of all, I'll give you an example along the lines of what I was talking about, which is sowing seeds of doubt, right? And if you caught I think it was either the last live stream or the one before it, I talked about spiritually abusive environments and how anytime there's a spiritually abusive leader, they never work alone. They always work in a system of people. And it's not just people, they're also invisible aspects to that system, such as rules and language and and just the typical operating methods of that environment. And one thing to know is that people who are part of this system that's enabling a spiritually abusive leader, they often use gaslighting to keep people quiet about what's happened. So when people who have been spiritually abused tell their stories, they'll sometimes talk about how something happened. Either they witnessed something that was not, appropriate, or something that, needed to be addressed. They were on the receiving end of something. And when they bring it up, they're questioned. And it's like, oh, well, are you sure he said that? Are you sure she reacted to you in that way? And there's this, are you sure, right? And when you're in a spiritually abusive environment, usually people who support that spiritually abusive system, their first instinct is to push back with this, are you sure? And that is a deliberate way of holding up the system. People who act this way may or may not realize it, but it doesn't take away from the consequences of that. The reason that knee jerk reaction happens is because the role of that system is to protect that spiritually abusive leader and maintain that system at all costs. So if there's sort of feedback or or reaction that can even that image or identity, the goal of that system is to push back and make the person who brought that up doubt themselves. Now, that's not the only way that gaslighting can occur. Um, but one way, that's a big way that it can occur, a significant way, and it's by introducing doubt. And so that's something to pay attention to. And if you are in the position where you've experienced spiritual abuse before, I'd like for you to think back and, and ask yourself, what was that experience like if and when you brought it up? For some people, they have not brought up what happened to them. But for some people, if they have brought that up, I'm curious as to see, what were your concerns, how were your concerns addressed, or how were your concerns reacted to? So if you are here in the chat, I see some people here in the chat, definitely let me know what you think about that. How was that experience for you? Um, how did you feel when you were treated that way, right? So one way in which gaslighting occurs is by the experience of sowing seeds of doubt. And it's done automatically, and it's done to protect and uphold a system, right? If somebody said, well, I saw aliens outside. Well, of course, a normal response to that would be, are you sure you saw what you saw? Because aliens are not people typically don't see aliens, right? But if somebody said, hey, they were treated um, harshly or spoken to unkindly or mistreated by somebody who is in spiritual authority, that's not something that could never happen. But in the eyes of the spiritually abusive system, it's something that's not allowed to happen, right? Something I also talk about with these systems is that the appearance is very important, and that takes precedence over everything. And so there's there has to be this appearance of everything is perfect and everything is good. So introducing doubt is one huge way that gaslighting operates, not only in spiritually abusive systems, but also in abusive relationships. It's a way to avoid accountability. If you remember from my last live stream, we also talked about narcissism and spiritual abuse, and how individuals who have narcissistic traits really do a lot to deflect accountability. And one way that that is done is through gaslighting. Another way in which gaslighting can occur is to make the person on the receiving end feel like there's something wrong with how they're reacting, right? So a normal response is looked at as something that needs to be criticized or questioned, right? So somebody who's doing this, somebody who's gaslighting somebody with this method in mind, might say something kind of awful or mean to them, right? And then when the person reacts, they'll say, why are you acting that way? Why are you making such a big deal about it? Or why are you being so defensive or whatever? behavior. And so it's the equivalent of throwing rocks and hiding your hands, right? And when somebody is on the receiving end of that and feeling like they have to defend themselves and having to defend what is a normal, arguable reaction, it takes the spotlight off of the real issue. So gaslighting is something that's done to deflect a lot, and so you'll see that in environments where abuse is rampant. So I'm curious to hear from anybody in the chat. Is that something that you have ever experienced, either made to feel like you are doubting you need to doubt yourself, or made to feel like there's something wrong with your reaction? I'll wait and see. I'll wait and see if anyone has any thing to say about that. Okay. So another way that gaslighting can show up in relationships or in environments, especially those that are spiritually abusive, is where people will. Somebody mentioned this in the last live stream, and I really liked how they described it. They said that they felt that when they were in their last spiritually abusive environment, they said that the people played a lot of mind games, and that is something that happens a lot with gaslighting. So you'll see things, and when we think about mind games, why do people play those? Well, they play mind games usually because they're trying to avoid something, they're not being direct about something. And so that can happen with gaslighting as well. And one way that we see mind games happening in gaslighting is when people behave in very different ways, publicly and privately. So you might be interacting with somebody who seems like one person in front of everybody else. Then when they are interacting with you or a select group of people, then it feels very different. You feel like, oh my goodness, are these the same people? And that's another way in which and that can happen. Now, again, you have to use nuance when you are trying to understand these things. We all, to some degree, are not the same people that we are publicly and privately, right? When we're around people that we trust and that we feel more comfortable with, we may show a side of ourselves that we don't show to everyone else. And that's not gaslighting. When gaslighting is occurring, it's a very different and very deliberate and very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not nuanced at all, right? You'll think, wow, how are these? You'll think it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of thing, where you see two people, you see one person that behaves like two very different people. And when you see this with spiritually abusive leaders, it's really a power play, because what's happening is that they, when someone is using their spiritual authority to abuse someone, they don't have to have integrity, is what they're telling themselves and what their actions are showing, right? And so when you're seeing somebody who's behaving very different ways, and you start to question, well, how am I looking at the world? How am I looking at this person? And I've heard that so many times from people who'll say, well, was I seeing things when I heard this person, act this way behind closed doors? Like, was I imagining things? And so again, there's that doubt, and there's just questioning what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. So those are some ways in which gaslighting can occur. There are a few different ways in which that can occur. Like I said, there's the sowing seeds of doubt. There's having you feel like you're on the defensive by questioning your own reactions to something. And then there's also just behaving in two very different ways. So, um, yeah, I think that's going to be about it for me. I'll wait a few more minutes and see if maybe a few more moments rather, to see if anybody has any questions about this. But I wanted to just put some information out there for you guys. Let's try and start to use, use ways of thinking that help you decode when gaslighting is going on, because it can be a term sometimes that is overused, and sometimes you want to be careful of taking a concept that is a valid concept and then stretching it so much that it doesn't mean anything. When gaslighting is occurring, it's a systematic process, and it's done over time and repeatedly to get you to doubt yourself. And again, um, when people have severe self-doubt, when they're always questioning themselves, then it makes it hard for them to stand up for themselves, and it makes them ultimately easier to control. So that's it for that. My website is skillsetcounseling.com. You can go there to book a free consultation. And of course, there are several videos on this channel that can help you understand the topic of gaslighting. I actually have a playlist about that as well. So I hope that you take a look at that, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.